Hey everyone, I'm Rachel,
And I'm Jen, and welcome to Devilish Bookworms, the podcast.
where we read and review books and release episodes every Tuesday.
This week we have The Dark Thing by John Ashley.
Yay!
Jared always knew that either he or his brother Jeremiah could inherit the paranoid schizophrenia that drove their father to take his own life. Despite the heavy cloud that follows him, Jared has married a wonderful woman and created a family. When his estranged brother finds his father's journal, Jared is shoved headfirst into his worst fear, a world where he can't tell the difference between his hallucinogenic nightmares and reality. Are his family members being possessed by demonic entities, or is it all in his head? Dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun. So, in this book, In the Dark Thing, there are going to be discussions of mental health issues, discussion of suicide, and in the book itself, there is a brief mention of animal murder. So, just keep an eye out for that if that's something that you have a hard time with. Jen, what do you think about this cover?
Okay, seriously, this cover is literally sick. I freaking love it. Now, the only thing that has like a brightness and color to it is a single butterfly that's in the middle of the book cover. But the rest of it is kind of like it's super dark and spooky. Like you've got hands coming out of a book, which I think that's fantastic. I think that's really creepy and it hits the mark. See, this is why it's important to discuss things because you get other people's perspectives and then you come up with something that's possibly the right answer, but possibly just something that you can run with your imagination, but still ties in.
Yeah, it's like the what if of art, right? Like, so I think we can all agree. So, in this story, the father was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and so it's kind of like the demon that the family has lived with, and then he takes his own life, and then it's always a thought of like, okay, well, who is it going to pass to the children? Are Jared and Jeremiah gonna suffer with this too? And then so Jeremiah finds the diary or finds the journal and then gives it to Jared. And then all of this stuff, like Jared starts having hallucinations and he starts hearing voices and all of this stuff. And the father's the one that wrote the journal. So I think that obviously, like, they're not the dad's hands, but it was just a thought, and it was like, ooh, what if, you know? And I love that about art. So when you have creative covers, like this cover is really cool. Um, I love that about creative covers.
Yeah, because everybody's going to have a different interpretation of it, but at the same time, you're giving us that creativity to run with our minds and also like yes, it gives us like a tiny bit of insight into your mind and your characters and your thoughts on what your book should be like. But at the same time, like again, it just gives us the ability to kind of take it a step further. And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So great. I love when people do have really cool covers.
Yeah. Um, did you know that
Mhm.
when books are like traditionally published, that like a lot of the times authors don't have a say in what their covers are?
And I think that's stupid because the only person that can really hit the nail on the head is the author. Like it's
Yeah.
coming from their brain, so why wouldn't they have the choice?
Yeah. I have seen authors where they were able to have a hand in the creative process of the cover, but then other people are like, oh, this cover created by so and so was beautiful. I'm lucky to have gotten it, or whatever the case may be. And I'm like, it's
Hmm.
weird. It's weird to think that like they wouldn't have that.
Yeah, but I have also seen the other side where an artist does create a book cover that has absolutely no idea about any book, but just created something and somebody buys it and ends up kind of like tweaking it to their art and not or their book, and I love that too.
Oh, you
Like
know
it,
what? That's true. I've seen some of them on threads where it's like, oh, I made this cover. Isn't it gorgeous? Like just waiting for the author with the right book to come along, which
yeah,
is kind of cool too.
yeah, it's like a fun aspect. The artist still gets their freelance creativity, and then you have the author that comes in and says that's perfect for my book, and it's like a match made in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And books and publishing and art, there's no one size fits all.
not at all. So, as Rachel already started saying, that Jared has created this happy life, and he's been doing so wonderful. He's got his family; they're all happy. It's an average life until his brother one day decides to try to get in contact with him after being estranged for, I think it was 6 years, from his mother's death. His brother made a comment at the funeral, and it just immediately pushed them completely apart. And although he's coming back into his life at this moment, it was only to discuss bad things that had happened to their father, which is where the paranoid schizophrenia kind of comes into play. And they really needed to hash it out and have a conversation, especially with Jared's new medical issues that he was having.
To touch a little bit on the relationship between the brothers. So, yes, they had a really rough childhood, and then Jared goes away. Jeremiah stays at home with their mom, and then they don't talk for 6 years or something. And then
No one then.
the mom dies, and they're having her funeral, and he comes back. Um, it was not a warm welcome. And so then he's like, fine, I can't do this anymore, and he disappears. And then when they come back together, there was a moment where Jared says something along the lines of like they were talking, they were chatting, and he's sitting there by the fire with his brother that he hasn't talked to in forever, and he's like, I really needed this, like more than any other medicine. Like I needed to just have a normal moment with my brother for a second, and I loved it. I loved being able to see the vulnerable moments between two brothers where it's like, man, I just really needed to hang out with my brother, you know?
It's rough when you have a sibling that you so much want to have a relationship with, but there's that something that kind of holds you back from it.
Narcissism.
Maybe narcissism and all sorts of things. But it sucks when you have that divide. But to see them to be able to come out of it, to even for that brief moment, it was really nice. I agree. But
Yeah.
I will say that Jeremiah lives in their original hometown, which is basically like this small town. If you blink, you'll miss it type of deal. And I feel like our town was like that for a while. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, everybody knew everybody's business and everybody knew everybody there. So it was hard to kind of like get out of that town unless you really wanted out of that town. And thank fucking God we made it out. But it's like, I don't know. In my opinion, it's like my sister and I, like, she still lives in the hometown, and she does live in our childhood home too. It's like, it's so weird because like going back there and even seeing the changes of it, it's like, it's really weird. But I think Jared had that same experience. Like, as much as he wanted to turn around and just stop going to his brother's house, like, he's like, wow, it's really weird being back in this home, seeing some of the changes, even though the bones are still the same, like the decor has changed. There's there's still a squeak on the stairs over here type of thing. And it's like it makes you relive all those like nostalgia moments that you have as a kid. Like you see the flashes of you running down the hallways, or you even see like the bad side of it, like he did, like his seeing his father, going crazy or something. Like I don't know. It's subjective, but it's kind of like really weird and gratifying at the same time to be brought back to that.
Yeah, it's definitely a strange thing.
Still strange driving down your old street and not going all the way down it.
I have no idea why you have to.
I can't. I literally can't. I can't do it.
No, what I'm saying is like I don't like why are you in the area?
Oh,
You know what I mean? Like I don't know why you have to drive by it.
well, I
It was the
don't
weirdest,
anymore
small, tiny little
because I lived on that same street, just on the damn other end of it, and it was so fucking hard not I couldn't do it though. I literally lived on the same street as you grew up on, and I could not fucking drive down that street to the end to go look at that house.
Yeah.
So
So Jared, after this whole trip with his brother, he goes back home and he's talking to his therapist and he's seeing a doctor and he is with his family and doing all the things, and then creepy stuff starts happening. Like his youngest daughter, he's seeing parallels between his youngest daughter and his brother, and it just gets steadily creepier and creepier until all of a sudden it's terrifying, right? And then it's his family members are possibly getting possessed and then maybe not, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And I will say that I had a hard time with not a hard time with it, kind of. There was a bit of I don't know the best way to explain it. It's kind of like on the one hand he is, suffering from schizophrenia like his father, possibly, maybe, if his father was schizophrenic. But on the other hand, it could possibly be literal demons and like possession and stuff. And obviously, I'm going to preface this by saying we don't talk about the second half of the book ever, or we try not to because of spoilers. But I feel like Jared didn't do anything to help anyone. Like he is, I get that if it is possession and supernatural things and all that, there's really not much you can do on your own. But like he doesn't reach out for help. He doesn't he tries to reach out to Jeremiah once and the call doesn't go through, and then it's kind of like, whoop, that didn't work, now what else can we try? And then he doesn't like, there was no like reaching out to, he didn't reach out to anyone for help. It was weird. And I kept sitting there thinking like, okay, so when is he going to go to a priest? When is he going to go to, a healer of some other faith? Or like, when is he going to try Googling help what happens when your family is possessed? Like I was constantly waiting for some kind of something, and then it didn't happen. And I was like, I get that we all deal with things differently, but I was like, really? Like you're not going to do anything?
see, my thing is now this is the part that tripped me up is when he started having these nightmares or night terrors as they classified them. He started sleepwalking, and one night he ended up in his daughter's bedroom, and that to me was like, maybe we should talk to our therapist or psychologist, whatever, whoever is prescribing you medication or trying to help you with this, the doctor, maybe you shouldn't be lying to him about how bad it is. Because
I want to intervene real quick and say that he was in his daughter's room to kill her.
Yeah.
Not that could have gone a couple different ways, He
Yeah,
had murder on his mind.
yes, he was not seeing things straight. And even still, um, in the latter half, or well, towards the middle half of the book, he takes his daughter for a drive at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he wants to have a chat with her about things that he's seeing, she's seeing, whatever. And yet he still lied to his wife about why he was doing it. He lied to his doctor about why he was doing it. He lied to the police officers, which obviously I can understand that. You don't want to get yourself in trouble. But still, but still, like the professionals that are literally trying to help him with his psychosis, he's sitting there lying to. His wife he's lying to. And he's not doing anything to help himself when he's to the point of harming his child. Like, that to me, mind blowing. I mean, if you're in a position where you're getting ready to hurt your child, your first thought should be, how can I not hurt my child? Like, how can I help myself so my child is safe? Like, where was the concern for his child?
Okay, I feel yes, I don't want to go in too deep with that, but yeah, 100%.
I guess the mama bear just came out in me during that part.
And here's the thing: is I 100%, and I would say this to anyone, I 100% understand that he is going through some serious stuff, but at no point in there was there like real concern for his kids. I was like, okay, there was one point in the book where he was like, okay, well, if I can't stop, something bad happened, and he's like, it's gonna happen again, and then he's like, well, if I can't stop it from happening again, I guess I could just like learn from it, or see what happened. And it's like, but you didn't even try and stop it from happening again. It was literally just like a recon at the expense of his kid. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah, it was definitely tough. But obviously, like, psychological issues and mental issues like that, or possessions, um, they're definitely, obviously nobody's gonna think straight. You're not in your right mind, and that's completely understandable. So some of the things that I'm thinking of and that Rachel's thinking of are obviously on the healthier mental side of things. I'm not saying 100% healthy. Um, but at the same time, it's like, these are things that I think his wife Melody should have been a little more, kind of like, she should have spoken up a little bit more about these things instead of just letting it lie the way that they did. Um, because I feel like she just kind of like, oh, honey, it's okay. I know you're going through a difficult time. It's fine to be understanding, but when your child's safety or your children's safety are at risk, there's got to be some kind of like, hey, no, now this stop, or at least like, try to help him a little bit more, do some preventative things. I don't know. There were things that could have been done.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, more along the lines of like, there were things that it's like when you're watching a movie and you're like, well, if they had just picked up the phone and called this person, then all of this would have been circumvented. Like,
Yeah,
not that that's the case here, but there were things that logically you were like, okay, well, why wouldn't you do this? Like, that's
yeah,
the first thing I would have thought of. Or, maybe we should have gone about it this way, but everyone goes through things differently, I guess.
right. But I mean, if there's a monster chasing you and there's a running vehicle, don't run past the running vehicle, get into the running vehicle, is kind of where I'm going with it. If there's a problem and you're sleepwalking, maybe do something to prevent you from being able to get out of the room while you're sleepwalking. Simple things.
Yeah, some kind of preventative measure.
Yeah, but they did none, and that kind of drove me crazy.
Jen, did you have any favorite characters in this book?
Honestly, I'm not going to lie. I did not.
Fair.
I don't think there was any one character to stand out to love in this book.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to pick one, I would say maybe the young daughter. Um, but I mean, even her, she wasn't a bad
Who,
character.
Elena?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
she wasn't a bad character. It was just like, I don't know. I just didn't have a favorite.
You just didn't love any of them.
Yeah, like nobody stood out more than the next.
I think that's valid. I think that my favorite character would probably be Melody, if I had to choose one.
Okay.
The wife.
Yeah, why her?
Because um I think that throughout the beginning of the book, she was very loving, very understanding, very
Mhm.
supportive of him. They actually had a really good relationship um from their interactions that you see in the beginning of the book. I
Mhm.
think that she did try and help him as much as she could throughout. I think that there were things about um her that I didn't love. Like you said, I feel like she could have tried to protect the kids a little bit more.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that she did it because she loved her husband so much and was trying to be there for him. And didn't think that he would hurt the kids because, like we said, they had such a good relationship before. But yeah.
It's actually kind of funny that I think my favorite, not it's not exactly a quote, but my favorite part of the book um actually kind of proves the reason I don't like Melody.
Okay.
Now, I know that's a weird way to put that, but um there was a part where Jared was actually trying to explain how he was feeling, and he was trying to do it the best way he could to Melody. And I didn't feel like she listened, even though she was hearing him in a
Mm-hmm.
sense. Um, but I'll just read it and maybe you'll understand the context. So they're sitting there having a conversation about how he feels and how he's trying to put it in a sense where she can understand it. So he says to her, "Do you remember freshman year of college when that asshole tried to roofie you? Your friends thought you couldn't handle your alcohol. It was like your second time drinking ever, was what you told me, and they thought you were being dramatic, but you knew something was wrong, and you made them walk you back to your dorm." And she says, "It's nowhere near the same." And he replies with, "It's exactly the same. You were the only one who knew what was happening inside your own mind, and you needed your friends to trust you because you were in danger, just like I'm needing you to trust me now." And I think in that moment, it showed her true colors in a sense, because although you may be hearing this, but if someone you love is like sitting there telling you, "I need you to trust me," like it was just like this situation where you were roofied and you knew something was wrong. I know something's wrong with me, but I need you to trust me. And like the fact that she just took that and like basically went, "Nah, man, you're
Yeah.
fucked up." And I think that part was my favorite because it was a good way to actually put it into perspective for her. But it also broke my heart that the one person that he should have been able to trust right then and there let him down.
Yeah. I can see that. It plays into the whole concept of like they talk about it. He talks about it with his therapist most I think, where it's like that conversation of can you really trust what you see, hear, feel, touch, whatever. And then the therapist says like, no, sometimes you can't, or sometimes you can't because of XYZ. And I get what you're saying because you want to trust people through everything. I took it as she was seeing it from the opposite point of view of like, listen, you're sick.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I do trust that you believe this is what's going on, but this is not what all signs point to.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and they did make a point of it to say that they didn't believe in God. She didn't believe in,
Hmm.
the imaginary friend of the daughter. So I
Right.
think that I took it differently. But I get 100% how it came across as like that was the person that he should have been able to go to out of anyone who would have been on his side. And she was like, no, take your medicines and call the therapist.
Yeah, she basically just shut him out and shut him down. And
Mm-hmm.
that bothered me. But I mean, I think that's like that whole stance right there, just it's really important for people to understand that, like, even though you don't see things exactly the same, if someone's trying to get you to understand they need help and they're trying to get you to understand where they're coming from so you can help them, you got to take that extra time to listen and try to really really understand where they're coming from, what they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she should have taken that second opportunity to fight a little harder, you know?
Sure.
But that's what this book is about. Like this is the whole point. Like listening to the people around you, feeling your things and going through all the emotions and mental aspects of life. So,
Yeah.
what about you? Did you have a favorite quote?
Um, I there was one that I wrote down at the beginning of the book, which was I think it's Jeremiah that says it. He says, "Ignorance is only bliss when you're safe. It's no longer bliss when the wolf is at your door."
Ooh, yes, I do remember that line. That was very well said.
Yeah, absolutely. You've taken all of this into consideration. What are your kind of like final thoughts or overall thoughts on the book?
So, I definitely struggled with the book because I felt like there was a lot of over explaining of certain things and it took
Mm-hmm.
away from the guts of it. But at the same time, I'm really glad that he spent time to take in account of mental awareness because it's really important, and sometimes distinguishing the line between mental illness and just night terrors are just like kind of it's a big jump, but at the same time it's like it's good to be discussed, it needs to be discussed.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I feel like the most important aspect of the book, I think, is the question of is this all in his head or are these things that he's actually experiencing? And I think that at times that overall theme was over explained because it was almost like every single page, almost every single chapter, it was brought up.
Hmm.
And I feel as though it took me out of it. If I'm constantly ping ponging back and forth between like, is this real? Is this not real? I know, I know when you bring it up and if that is clearly the overall theme, you don't have to keep reminding me. Like I know that this is what we're looking at. Is it real or is it not real? And I think that the constant bringing it up brought me out of it 100%. And um, I feel like if I almost feel like that might be why they didn't, do more preventative things because it was like we don't want to say something that's gonna make you think, oh yes, this is real, or oh no, this is all in his head.
Yeah.
Um, but again, it just took me out. I think that if he had full conviction of this is real, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm hearing, and of course, still have that little thought in the back of your head of like, oh God, am I sick like my father? Then I think that would have kind of like immersed me more in the oh gosh, is he, isn't he?
So I do kind of get where you're coming from because I think that's kind of like what it was for me in a sense. Because, like I had said, it's over explained. Like, yes, it's great to to have the information, but it's like there's certain things that I want to hear about when I'm reading this type of story. I want to know what he's seeing. I want to know what his family is seeing versus what he's seeing. I want to know what his father saw. I want to know how that all may kind of tie into the schizophrenia. But when you keep bringing it back to like, oh yeah, his father saw this, his father saw this, his father saw this, his father saw this, his father said this, his father said this, his father said this. I get it already. Just get to the gap.
Yeah. Especially when you have the journal entries. Like,
yes.
Because it's like the journal entries did a beautiful job of portraying the dad's fear. So the son didn't need to constantly explain it.
Exactly. Perfect. That perfectly said. Don't get me wrong, like the premise of this story is so fascinating, and I absolutely love the fact that, again, he's writing about mental illness and the fine line between sanity and insanity type of deal. But I just wish it was tightened up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So this book was written by John Ashley. He's an indie author from Missouri, and you can find him at johnashleyauthor.com. His website is gorgeous. Like, it's really pretty. It's like dark and it gives very much horror author vibes. Jen, what are we reading next week?
Next week, we are reading Welcome to Meadowbrook by Cassandra Thompson.
Yay! How excited are you, dude?
Very. I already downloaded it, so I am prepared.
Yeah, I'm pretty jazzed about it too.
And it's everything that we hope for like this time of year. Gothic horror. Love it.
Yeah. Like, I read this kind of book all throughout the year, so like it's not really year specific for me. And people are like, oh, it's spooky season, and I'm like, every day is spooky season. Ugh.
Well, don't get me wrong, I love Gothic books during any time of the year, but I mean, I just love them so much more during like fall, and it's cold and crispy and rainy and dreary and
cold and crispy.
It is. It's got a crisp to it outside right now. It's so cold. Fucking New England. Ugh.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Devilish Bookworms.
If you want to chat with us, be sure to check us out on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
You can also find our podcast on YouTube and wherever else you listen to podcasts.
We will see you next week.
Bye.